Consciousness as a topic is very difficult to get your mind around, and it lends itself to several seeming paradoxes, and these are paradoxes that some people experience. So for instance, there's a phenomenon called the split brain in neurology, where you have people who have grand mal epilepsy who have to get a surgical procedure done to keep the seizure activity from spreading from one hemisphere of the brain to the other and engulfing the whole brain. And so what is done surgically still to this day, this has now been done for about 50 years or so, the corpus callosum is cut in the fiber tracts that connect the left and right hemisphere gets surgically severed, and that segregates the seizure activity to one half of the brain. But that also has the effect of segregating conscious inputs to the two hemispheres. So you can design experiments where you present the right hemisphere certain information and the left hemisphere doesn't get it, and you can see, you can differentially interrogate the two hemispheres. And the result of all of this research suggests that when you divide a human brain fully, when you cut the corpus callosum, you have created two conscious points of view. That there's something that it's like to be the left hemisphere, and there's something that it's like to be the right hemisphere, and it's not the same. And they can have different perceptions. They certainly do have different perceptions if you design the inputs correctly. They can have different beliefs. They can have different desires. When they can even fight one another. You can get a tug of war. You can have a man who's trying to button his shirt with his left hand, but the right hand is trying to stop him, right? So who is he in that case? There's an account of a man who's hugging his wife with one arm and trying to punch her with the other, right? So there's a wealth of data attesting that there are now two points of view here. So imagine what it would be like to have this procedure done, right? Where do you go if sectioning your brain down the middle creates two conscious points of view? So it may be tempting to say you land in the left hemisphere, which has, in most people, more linguistic ability, but there are people who have linguistic ability on both sides. You can imagine what it would be like to rejoin the two hemispheres after some period where their conscious lives were separate, right? So you have a person who has an intact brain, you divide his brain, he lives for 5 years that way, and his hemispheres diverge to whatever degree that they do. Imagine rejoining those hemispheres after 5 years, and so that things remembered by the right hemisphere are now connected to the left hemisphere, but yet it was only the right hemisphere at the time that experienced them. It is paradoxical to imagine the stream of consciousness divided and then rejoined, but it's only paradoxical if you imagine the self as a boat kind of bobbing on the water there, because then you have to figure out which path it took. Did it go the left route or the right route? And when it gets rejoined, then it's just back in the mainstream again. But that's not what's happening. Clearly consciousness is something that can be partitioned. I think if anything has been learned from these experiments and these neurological conditions, that seems to be the case. And if it can be partitioned, it can be rejoined. And in some ways, we might not even be fully unified with intact commissures, with an intact corpus callosum, because we know that data transfer across the two hemispheres can't be perfect. So it's possible that even now there are kind of islands of conscious life in a fully intact human brain that are not fully integrated. It may be like something to be you from a point of view that you, the one hearing these words right now, don't inhabit, right? So there may be someone else in there, and this kind of invokes a classical Freudian picture of the unconscious. In Freud's terms, the unconscious was in fact conscious. It's just you're not conscious of it, right? It's like the unconscious is aware of what you are not aware of. And while there's not a lot of modern evidence to suggest that that was an accurate picture of the mind, and most people think about what's called the cognitive unconscious now as a place where the lights aren't on, right? It's doing, the brain is doing a lot of mental work, but it's not like something to do that work. The only area where it's like something is where you are in consciousness. But it may be that it's even weirder than that, and it's possible that something like a conscious unconscious, which is kind of sort of like having another person in your head, capable of making decisions in some cases, capable of biasing your attention in some cases. That may in fact be true, and it would be, it's certainly hard to disprove that. It's hard to argue that it isn't based on what we know about information transfer across the brain.